Hi everyone, Dr. Hall continuing on in our lecture on abortion. So we're now in the third part of the first lecture. And so this may seem silly, but it's really important to talk about the fact that the number one cause of abortion is an unintended pregnancy, right? So most people who are planning to get pregnant, who get pregnant when they want to get pregnant, most of those people do not choose abortion. Usually they only end up choosing abortion if their circumstances change drastically or if there are significant medical problems, either in the mother or the fetus, that are life-threatening. So the vast majority of abortions that occur are in unintended pregnancies. So let's just talk about what we know about unintentional pregnancies, keeping in mind that there's lots of different things that kind of get folded into this broad heading. So certainly there are the people who were thinking, well, we'll try to let's have a kid maybe a year from now, but they get pregnant now, right? So there's the people who it's more an issue of timing, where this timing wasn't what was planned, but the pregnancy in and of itself may not be unwelcomed. And then there are people who really don't want to get pregnant at all at any time in the near future, which is very different. We also know that over the course of a pregnancy, in people who choose to continue the pregnancy, a lot of people in retrospect or upon reflecting, they kind of change their perspective, and they'll say, oh, we wanted to get pregnant, even though at the time that they did, it might have not at all been what they wanted. So we're human, and our minds are malleable. So we know that for most of this century, certainly most of the past several decades, about half of all pregnancies in the United States were unintended. That's a lot, right? So half of all pregnancies were kind of whoopses, right? Now, keep in mind, yes, some of those were, well, we don't want to get pregnant, but if we do, that wouldn't be so bad, or it would be fine, right? But then some of those were, no, we really, really did not want to be pregnant. And so it had been fairly consistent about half of all pregnancies until the 2008 to 2011 time frame, when it all of a sudden decreased to 45%. And as you'll recall, the Affordable Care Act went into effect during this time. Birth control became more accessible, more affordable for more people. We also had increased access to the LARCs, those get it and forget it methods, right? Our long-acting reversible contraceptives, like the implant and the IUD. So not only were they becoming more popular, right, and the implant was relatively new, right? IUDs had been around for a while, but they were becoming more popular. The word was kind of getting out, hey, these are great methods to use. But they also have a pretty big upfront price tag, anywhere from $400 to $900. So these are methods that were simply out of reach for anybody who didn't have insurance coverage. So once we had the Affordable Care Act, once insurance had to cover birth control, many more people were able to access these highly effective forms of contraception, right? So the more effective your contraception is, the less likely you are to have an unintended pregnancy. So as more people were able to use these methods, we saw decreases in these rates. So we also have to acknowledge that unintended pregnancy rates vary dramatically depending on your socioeconomic status. Now, some of this is, of course, going to be due to access and ability to afford birth control. Some of this may also be due to education or understanding of how to use these methods, and also what traditionally had been used in your family or by your friends, right, in the communities of which you are a part. So lots of things are relational. But what we can see, of course, again, is that once the Affordable Care Act was instituted, we saw significant decreases in unintended pregnancies across all groups, and most particularly in those folks who were in the lower socioeconomic categories. So just to let you know, a poverty level for a single individual in this country right now is somebody who makes $12,000 a year or less. right? So that is not enough in almost every community in this country to be able to pay rent, pay for electricity, phone, heat, buy groceries, and live, right? So when we say 200% of federal poverty level, we're talking $24,000 per year annual income. So very low income level. So then you have to wonder, if we've been bringing down the rate of unintended pregnancy, does that also decrease the abortion rate? We would expect that it would, but a lot of times we expect things to happen and they don't occur. So what does the data show us? Actually, yes. So abortion rates right now are lower than they have ever been in our country. So let's see. Let me see if I can highlight this for you. This was a study looking at data back from 2013. There's always a delay because it takes time to collect the data and analyze it. So I'm pretty sure my next slide has some more recent data, which is hard to find. But so we definitely had this sharp drop in teen pregnancies, right? And so we also had expanded coverage of contraceptive costs and more people using these highly effective, long-acting reversible contraceptives like the IUD and the implant. So this was the most recent data chart that I could show you, and you can see continued declines in the abortion rate in the United States. So over here on the left, we can see when it first became legal. So we don't know how many abortions were happening per 1,000 women before 1973. Again, if you knocked on somebody's door and said, "Have you had an abortion?" they're not likely to say yes, right? They could end up going to jail for that. So we don't have data before then. We saw a significant increase in the number of abortions that were done in this country into the 1980s. And then as a result, largely of increasing availability of contraception through Planned Parenthood clinics, through insurance coverage, through, and then eventually through expanded insurance coverage, right, which started happening around here, as well as the increasing availability of those long-acting, highly effective contraceptives, we now have a lower abortion rate than we have ever had historically. And so this is all still happening under the landscape of abortion still being legal, right? So I just want to make sure you understand that making something legal or illegal, criminalizing it, may or may not decrease the frequency at which it happens, and that there are other things that we can do that would be effective in decreasing the number of abortions that occur in our country. So our next, this is it for this phase, and then the next section of the lecture, we're going to be talking about actual methods of abortion. How are they actually done?